Hello, Year 12s. Okay, now I need to show you how to use the X32 digital mixing desk. Obviously, you're going to use it when you do live performances. You are going to use it for your recording, studio recording stuff. It's we can use it for both live sound and for multi-track sound. Now I'm going to take you through just some basics. What's on the screen is a digital representation of the mixing desk. Some versions of this video, as in I'll do probably more than one, because there's probably more than one video's worth of material to go through. I'm drinking coffee, by the way, as well. It's early on a Saturday morning, so there we go. Well, relatively early, 10 o'clock. That's early enough. Now, that is a representation because it's easier because I can point to things. I probably will end up having a camera. I'll probably have to gaffer tape a camera to my head as I'm using the actual mixing desk. But again, it's probably easy here to show you the general settings. Most of the settings we'll be doing today is to do with explaining the routing or routing, depending on which way you want to say it. Yeah, you may well want to take some notes. That would probably be a very useful thing. So I'll try and repeat things as much as possible so you can take some notes. No, I do not want that set up. Okay, so bang on 10 o'clock, which is good. So when you turn on your mixing desk, you won't initially obviously see this bit here, but this is generally exactly as it looks. Okay, when you turn it on, it'll all show up and light up. You don't know what someone's done to it previously. Okay, so it would be in an ideal world, people would put it back to a general state when they used it. They put it back to a default state, but generally, because people are using it for lots of different things and they use it quickly, they generally don't put it back to the state that you might want to work it in. So hence, what microphones they've plugged in and what they've done will be different than what you actually want to do with it. So we're going to take you through a few things. Now at the moment, you'll see that around here, you can see channel 9, that's the microphone I'm talking into. Now I've set this up so that channel 9 actually goes through, and in my routing setups, which obviously you won't understand yet, but I generally do, obviously I've actually set the outputs of channel 9 to go into my computer, just so I can record my voice. So don't think that when you set up the mixing desk, it will suddenly have this already up. Generally, it'll be all the way down. If I turn this down, you won't be able to hear me, at which point that'll be a pretty rubbish tutorial. The first thing is that each of these channels has identical settings. As I click on each of these channels, you'll see that each of these channels generally has the same kind of setup. Okay, now these are all set up slightly differently, but they've all got the same ability to do the same things, if you see what I mean. And there's 17 to 32. So you've actually got 32 different inputs on the back of the mixing desk. Okay, so you can plug in 32 microphones if you had 32 microphones. We almost have 32 actually. Probably we could manage it, but I don't know. We wouldn't necessarily need to. But obviously, if we need to, we've got 32. So if we actually click on channel 1732, that takes us through another 16. That just means that we can fit lots of channels into it's a big mixing desk, but it's not as big as some. If we were to have all 32 of them in one big row, then the mixing desk would be at least twice as wide as it is, and we would need a bigger studio, which means we need a bigger department, and we can't afford one of them at the moment. You never know, though. Music school, who knows? So you've got 16 channels on the initial thing. Now, you're never going to necessarily need to use 16 channels, more than 16 channels at the moment, but we'll come to why 1732 may end up being used. And that's to do with if you're recording in another room with our S16 digital snake box. So hence you can plug microphones in another room, run one cable that comes to the back of the mixing desk, and actually then you can assign these different channels 17 through 32 to actually pick up from not the physical inputs at the back of the mixing desk, but you can actually tell it to be listening out for the 16 inputs on that S16 stage box. Okay, but we'll talk about that again. Now across here again it says Aux-in Fx Return. Now Aux-in around here, now this on mine is set up as PC. So if I was, for example, to play some music, say for example I went and I played something on Spotify, I'll just quickly play something on Spotify, one sec. Don't judge my music taste. Here we go. So, the first thing on the list of Hot Hits UK is Ollie Murs. So there we go. Now I just press play on that. Okay, so literally, obviously, that's how much PC I want going through. So I've set that up again. When you turn on the mixing desk when you first buy it from the factory, it doesn't do that. Okay, it doesn't do that. So I have to actually set it up to tell it that on those auxiliary 1 and 2, I wanted that to be the sound from the PC. Why? Well, it's because I can control how much sound from the PC comes through the monitors in the studio or through the headphones. Okay, so that's what that control is for. Auxiliary 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 actually can, well, actually auxiliary 1 and 2, they're actually you can actually plug things directly into the back as like big jack, like the guitar cables. So you could plug kind of that kind of stuff into the back there. Oh, by the way, if you hear any bird song, it's because I'm in my studio in my garden, and the birds can be heard, so they're singing. So don't worry, I haven't kind of got a caged bird in here anyway, so I can hear them through the headphones. So don't fret, I've not captured any birds and keeping them against their will. They're just in the garden. So auxiliary 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's actually inputs at the back of the X32, which are jack inputs, and then there's 2 phono inputs. So don't need to worry too much about that. But what I would say is that aux 1 and 2 I've set to actually not be the direct inputs. I've just set that to be the inputs from my computer. So one thing the desk can do is you either have physical input, so you can plug a microphone into channel 9, or because it's a digital mixer, you can say, okay, I want channel 9 to actually be the computer, so the PC sound. And actually the settings, the routing, okay, here is what can do that. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the usual settings. Okay, and I still sometimes get confused with some of this stuff because it's not a particularly, it's good, it's not that difficult, but it's still not that easy either because it does so many things. Now, when you initially turn it on, you want to basically turn everything down initially. Okay, because if you accidentally do something and the volume's up, then yeah, that's not going to be great for you. So when you turn on, you want to go into routing. Okay, now on the X32, routing will not necessarily be exactly here, but you will therefore see there where there's the actual screen. This is like the screen on the X32 but bigger, and to the next there is a routing button. When you go into routing it initially, I think you want to be on home, and I'm just going to explain what this is. Channel processing block patch. This is saying the physical inputs, so input 18, 916, 1724, 2532, and the auxiliary ins, that's the physical inputs at the back of the X32. Okay, and probably in a bit I'll load up a picture of the X32 and pop it here so you can actually see. In fact, I'll quickly do that now and get a picture of the X32, the back of it. One second, let me just, there we go. View image. Okay, so hey, there's the X32. Now what I'll do is, yeah, so when I talk about the back of the X32, I'm talking about this stuff here. Okay, you've got there, that's 8, another 8, another 8, another 8. So input 1 to 8 is there, input 9 to 16 is across there, input 17, 24 is underneath to there, and 25 to 32 is there. The Aux-in Remap, the aux-ins are down there. You see the little jack ones and the 2 red and white phono. Above that is aux-out, and we'll get to that again at some point. There's an aux-out control there. Okay, but that's basically the back of the X32. You won't see that very much because obviously often it's kind of hidden with all the cables in the studio, but at some point we are going to have to understand what happens around the back there. Okay, so the initial setup you want, and you'll notice that 1 to 8 I've set as 1 to 8, 9 to 16 are 9 to 16, so that means that those channels here, 1 through 16, will basically correspond to those top row of inputs. I've got the same for 1724, but when I've hit 25 to 32, it says card 18. Oh God, Donald Trump. Let's get rid of that. Card 1 to 8. Okay, now card 1 to 8. The card is the little bit that, well, it isn't there on this picture, but that is there. We've got a little card which basically is like our little silver UR22 sound interfaces that we use with Cubase. It's basically, you can plug a USB into the Behringer and it acts like a giant sound interface. Apart from that, instead of being able to plug 2 microphones in and record them into Cubase, this you can do 32. So hence it's a 32 channel mixing desk. The reason I've got that set up that way, you'd normally want to just literally have it as local 2532 if you were going to use 32 inputs. But card 1 to 8 means that the first 8 channels of the card record, and also I can listen to them on 25 to 32. Okay, so that just is something I do. Again, the reason for this with me is that sometimes 25 and 26 I set as I've actually set to be the output from my PC, because that I can listen to that, but I can't record it. So if I set the output of PC to 25, 26, if I'm listening to something and I want to kind of, for example, record something onto Cubase, like through the computer. So if I'm listening to like my year 7 8 radio show scheme of work, if I'm listening to something on the radio, I can therefore just literally record channel 25, 26 in Cubase, and that will be my PC inputs, because Cubase will only record from one of those actual 32 channels. It doesn't have a setting to record from the auxiliary channels. So even though my PC, I can hear it through the headphones, Cubase wouldn't be able to record an auxiliary input. It would be able to record 25, 26. So hence I've set 25 to 32 just to be that. So just those 8 channels are the first 8 channels on Cubase. Aux-in Remap. Now Aux-in Remap, you'll see there, card 1, 2. That means that's what I've done there. Auxiliary 1, 2 is actually card 1, 2. That's so I can listen to my PC. I could do card 1, 6. That means all of them, but actually 3, 4, 5, 6 are still physical inputs I can use. But then number 1 and 2 is just my PC sound for when I'm just listening to it. Okay. Sometimes I forget and I end up having PC sound coming through 25, 26 and 1 and 2, and it ends up being too loud. So generally I turn 25, 26 down unless I'm trying to record something off the internet or something that's hence streaming, and I can't then kind of, if it's a YouTube video, you can download the audio and stuff like that off a downloader. But if it's something that's streaming and you want to record something that's streaming, stuff like that, then you can't do that unless you do 25, 26. So initially you're going to probably want to just have that set up as 1 through 8, 9 through 16, 17 through 24, and then probably 25 through 32. Now, if you have, you'll see here, AES50A says connected. That's our digital snake. Okay, now that can be in another room. We have a cable, which is a kind of what's a Cat5 Ethernet cable, which goes from the back of our, from here, the back of our, just there, the back of the X32, goes from the back of our X32, and then hence we've got 100 meters of cable. So we could, for example, put the S16 100 meters away, plug microphones into it, and then hence still hear what was going on. Okay, now it's unlikely we're going to do that. Okay, if we did an outside or outdoor festival, it might be probably 50 meters by the time we'd actually started running cables, but we could, if you wanted to, 100 meters away. So microphones could be 100 meters from where we're mixing from. Generally in day-to-day use, it would just be next door in the in M6 that we'd be recording from. Often what happens is you'll come in and you'll find that 1724 has been set to AES51 to 8. What that means is input 17 to 24 here, okay, our second lot of tracks here, is actually the first 8 tracks on that S16 digital snake. That means you can control those digital snake channels from the mixing desk. Okay, so they plug things in another room or 100 meters away, but you actually have control over all the volume of all those things that they've physically plugged in. Okay, so sometimes if all 16 of those are being used, if we were doing a big concert in the hall, we would therefore input 1 to 8 and 9 to 16 would probably be AS51 to 8, AS59 to 16, because the microphones wouldn't be plugged in directly to the mixing desk, they'd be plugged into the AS50. Okay, so again, this is about routing. This is like where you want the sound to go. Okay, So for the moment, that's kind of that. The home thing, you know, if you plug a microphone into channel 3, but it's set to AES51 to 8, then you won't be, when you go onto here and turn up channel 3, you won't get a signal. And you'll think the microphone's not working. But the issue is that you're churning at channel 3, which is actually listening to the signal coming from channel 3 input on the AES50 next door, which may not be turned on, and it may not have any microphone plugged into that channel. So if you're plugging something directly into the mixing desk, you need to make sure in routing that therefore local 1 to 8 is chosen. So if you plug something into 9 to 16, as I have done here, okay, if I was to suddenly change this, you'll stop hearing me. Okay, if I suddenly change that, then you stopped hearing me. I was continuing talking, but I just changed that. Everything was still there. The microphone was still plugged into channel 9 on my mixing desk, but I changed the setting. So it stopped looking for that in the mixing desk, and it went looking in the snake where there's nothing plugged in. So hence, you didn't hear anything. So often you'll think a microphone isn't working, and it is. It's just that you haven't, the desk isn't set up correctly, or somebody else, normally year 13 music tech students, have been recording stuff in the other room, and hence they've left it on a setting on the digital snake, and hence not the one in the recording studio. All right, so that's the home bit. Now, out 1 through 16. Cubase has 16 outputs there. Okay, so there they are there, 16 outputs. Normally, 15 and 16 are your main outs, okay? Not 1 to 2, and I'll come to this in a bit, okay? Normally 15, 16, because 15, 16 are the ones that are on the far right-hand side, as far away as from the inputs as you can get. So 15, 16 is where I'd usually have the outputs being. Okay, that's kind of what Behringer would kind of say. It doesn't matter, you can have the outputs as anything you want, but 15, 16, right and left. So hence right, main, left, and then that one is set to main, right. Now I could set output 15, 16 to be anything. Okay, there's loads of things. So again, the output is just whatever I tell it to listen for. So it will output whatever I tell it to. For the moment, 15, 16, when you go onto the mixing desk, should be main left, main right. Okay, where it says tap, this stuff here, post fader, okay, post fader, these things here that you move up and down are faders. They fade the sound in and out. If you have post fader, that means that the output, if I turn the main output up, okay, then it would look at the faders of these channels. Okay, so if I was to turn this down, I'm still getting, I won't turn it down, but if I did, you'd still be getting a signal. The mixing desk would still get a signal, but the volume will be down. Post fader takes that into account. It says, okay, yes, I'm getting a signal from channel 9, but the volume's down, so you won't hear anything. If you went pre-fader, then it wouldn't matter whether the volume was up or down on the main mixing desk. It would literally send those to output 15, 16 anyway. Okay, now this is useful for the point of view of setting up monitors, fallback monitors. If you're on stage, you need to hear what you're doing. So you have fallback monitors, as in the monitors that point towards the performers. Now at that point, often you will want sometimes them to be pre-fader, because if the main mixing desk is turned down, you don't want the fallback monitors to go up and down as the main stereo, as the main PA system gets turned up and down. Yeah, especially because sometimes in between acts in a gig, the main speakers might be turned off, but the sound guy, the sound engineer, might be actually talking through the fallback monitors to the band, saying, "Oh, can I have a bit of drums, please? And can I have a bit of this? And does everything sound okay on stage?" They don't want that through the main house speakers, because not everybody needs to hear the conversation the sound guy has with the people on stage. But then the people on stage can hear the sound guy. Okay, the sound guy might actually have some music playing through the main speakers that doesn't play through the monitors, the fallback monitors, but he talks to them through the fallback monitors. Okay, and this mixing desk will do all of that. It's even got it's even got microphone on it, so you can actually then press a little button and then talk, and then hence you'll be able to talk to people through monitors. Okay, and again, you can do that through the S16 digital snake. So if you wanted to, if you were 100 meters away, okay, oh, my wife's playing a game. If you were 100 meters away, then it means that you could have a conversation. Okay, you could literally physically talk to them 100 meters away and say, okay, yeah, I'm not. Otherwise, every time you want to change something or do something, you'd have to walk 100 meters to them to tell them what you wanted them to do. Okay, so you do not want to have to keep on walking to and fro and to and fro. So it's actually quite useful to have that. So, so 15, 16, our main outs want to be post fader. Okay, there's other scenarios where you'll have different things like pre-fader and post EQ and pre-EQ and stuff like that, but we're not there yet. Okay, output 1 at the moment for me is MixBus 1, which is my monitor. So if I have a monitor here, if I plug that in like in a gig, then I would therefore send, that be like my singer's monitor. So my singer might want a specific amount of the other instruments that are playing, and that might be different than the balance you want through the mains, and you can do that on this mixing desk. Okay, now you won't hear some of this stuff, but I'm just going to kind of show you. Say for example, and you can probably, you know, take some notes on this because it's quite useful to do. So for the moment, I'm finishing on out 1 to 16 at that point, just because you need to make 15, 16 is left, right, and 1 is probably going to be MixBus 1. 2 might be MixBus 2. I've kind of not set it up like that at the moment, but for you, I'd turn up that. Okay, like so. And that means I could talk to them, and that'd be absolutely fine. If then I didn't want that going through the mains, I'd turn this down. So they would still hear me, okay, like you're hearing me at the moment, but then it wouldn't go through the main speakers. So I could chat through one speaker, but not through another. And that is very, very useful in gigs, especially if something's going wrong, especially if you're saying, okay, something's not working there, can you just kind of try this? Or, you know, it may even be you have a specific sound monitor at the back to talk to people backstage. So the sound engineer might say, okay, there's something wrong with the guitar amp, can we try and find another jack cable because that one's working? And it means that the sound guy is going to be the first person who knows that, because they're going to be listening either on headphones or through the main monitors, and they're going to go, ooh, we can't hear the guitar. Okay, something's wrong. Okay, I need to talk to someone. Now, if you don't have the ability to talk to them through the mixing desk and through a monitor at backstage, you actually have to physically leave the mixing desk, run down there, and then try and sort the problem out yourself. But that is not ideal, because then you end up running potentially backstage. Nobody's manning the mixing desk. If anything starts feeding back, nobody's there to turn it down, and everything gets very complicated and not very professional if you start doing that. So it's very useful to have a monitor backstage to be able to chat to people backstage. Okay, it might even be that one of those monitors backstage is actually just a pair of headphones, and it might be if you have a stage manager, then that stage manager will hence be able to relay these messages. So if you have a kind of a roadie crew and a stage manager, the stage manager listens to what is required, and then hence the stage manager, I might say, okay, from the mixing desk, I might say, okay, cool, we're ready for the second band now. And the stage manager says, okay, ready for the second band now. They get the roadies to then tell the band to go on. Okay, so hence there's a very clear way of doing things. The mixing desk allows that to happen. You don't necessarily need to have walkie-talkies and things like that. It's not necessarily the world's worst thing if you do have walkie-talkies, but the mixing desk will do that. Okay, if you set an input, then hence, you can send that into whatever speaker you want with this system on this mixing desk. Okay, so that's kind of generally about fallback monitors, which you will end up using. Okay, other things. If we go back to routing, aux out you don't really need at the moment to worry about. Okay, that's if you want to take things from aux out. So if you wanted, for example, out of here to I don't know, do a 2-track recording. If you, for example, you wanted to plug in, I can't quite work out what you do. I don't think I've ever actually used the aux outs in the X32. Officially, I suppose, if you wanted to take a 2-track recording out the back of something and just be recording it as you're going, then you'd plug something into aux 1, 2, and then hence it's then main left and right. So aux, that will be left and that will be right, and then hence that's fine. Okay, there's other things you would use it for, but very rarely do I end up using it. Okay, so don't worry about that. I can't imagine when you might use it, but if you do, we'll go through it. P16. P16 we do have. P16 is a personal monitoring system. Okay, that means that you can set up a personal monitoring system. It's a little bit like fallback monitors, apart from that those people on a P16 actually have control over what they hear. So rather than you setting it up for them and them saying, can I have a bit more of this, bit more of that, they actually can set up their monitor themselves. Now we do have a P16 which we use in the vocal booth, and sometimes if someone's doing drumming, they'll have it in M6. Okay, and it's the little kind of smallish silver box, kind of some bits and bobs on. It plugs in via an Ethernet cable again. So into that thing it says personal monitoring. It's the same kind of Cat5 cable. It does also have on the, one second, where are we routing? Home. On the AES50, at the back of the AES50, there is also one of those personal monitoring things. So if someone, for example, a drummer, for example, wanted to be able to do their own sound, you could do this for everyone if we had enough boxes. Therefore, people could do their own fallback kind of mix. They could be in control of what they hear. Okay, we use it for the vocal booth because someone can actually turn up and down the backing track, turn up and down their own microphone, so they can set up their own mix. So it saves the sound engineer from having to do that. Okay, but again, you probably won't use that in live sound that much because we don't have that many. If we had enough money, we'd probably buy quite a few of them for the musical later in March, because then everybody could wear headphones and everybody could be in charge of exactly what they hear. So hence everyone could literally say, okay, I need a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, and they would basically be in charge of what they hear. Which means that the sound guy has a little bit of it. Sound guy just then needs to focus on making the overall the overall PA mix sound good, as opposed to be constantly changing things. Because obviously that orchestra kind of won't want to necessarily, we won't want them keeping on saying to the sound guy, can I have a bit more of this through my monitors please? Because in a musical you can't do that. You can't start chatting in between songs and say, can I have some more vocals in my monitor? It doesn't work. So yeah, P16 we have one, but again not massive issue at the moment. Now, card out. This is the 32 channel card that we have. That's what it looks like there. You'll see it's there. That's the multi-track kind of card we have that's kind of bolted into the back here. Okay, and that's what it looks like. Okay, you can get other cards. Ours is a USB card. It's not mine is a Firewire USB because it's one of the earlier ones. But now the one we've got is just USB. So it just has a USB output, sorry, that goes to the computer. And that card will record up to 32 channels. Okay, so it's a 32 channel desk. Normally, you could potentially make them 1 through 8, 9 through 16, 17 through 24, etc., etc. But at the same point, that the opportunity is there to record completely different things as well. So at the moment, my 1724 is my digital snake. So hence, if I was doing a recording session here, my digital snake is around just at the other side of the studio, which I'm about 7-8 feet away, but it means I don't get as many trailing cables. So therefore, I could plug a drum kit straight into that, and hence that in Cubase would be 1724, would be 1 to 8. Okay, which is good. Yeah, so again, card 1 to 8 is separate to 2532, but again, it will differ depending on what you're wanting to record. Okay, generally that's just the way. Okay, at the moment I've got out 1 through 8 there, but that's only set up that way because of the way I'm recording. Kind of, I've got the screen recorder at the moment, and I'm kind of doing a screen recorder and talking. Out 1 through 8 is so that therefore the sound gets recorded by the computer. Okay, usually I'd have it on local 1 through 8. AES58 we've talked about. The AES50, that's our digital snake. Now you can have 2 digital snakes, hence why one says AES50A, AES50B, because you can have 2. So you could have 2 digital snakes plugged in, and hence then lots of inputs wherever you wanted them. Okay, AES50A there, where it says output 1 to 8. This is the AES50 outputs. The inputs have already been set here. Okay, so hence that's not a problem. It's what the outputs are. So the outputs on the AES50A, so the digital snake, okay, is outputting 1 through 8, which means output 1 through 8 is actually set. So output 1 to 8 is sending to output 1 to 8 from AES50. If we did local 1 to 8, then whatever you plugged into the digital snake, okay, would come through your actual outputs at the mixing desk, if that makes sense. Okay, depends where your PA speakers are. Yeah, if I had my mixing desk and my PA speakers next to it, but I had, for example, my digital snake was on the stage, but my PA speakers are nearer to my mixing desk, then I'd want local 1 through 8. So the AES50 sends go out of my mixing desk as opposed to the digital snake. If my digital snake is 100 meters away and my PA speakers are right next to my mixing desk, I wouldn't want the output from the AES50 and having to get 100 meters of XLR cable to track back all the way to the mixing desk. But again, the other way around, if my digital snake was on stage and my mixing desk was up in the sound box in the hall, which is a long way away from the stage, I would want it to go from the digital snake's outputs. So again, it depends, where are you going to plug your PA speakers into? Are you going to plug them into the back of the X32, or are you going to plug them into the outputs there of the AES50A, which is the digital snake, the S16? Okay, so again, it depends where you're plugging your speakers in. So if you plug your speakers into an output, then you need to therefore send the sound there. Okay, pretty simple in its idea. It's just making sure. The words outputs and inputs at some point in the X32 get quite complicated. Okay, outputs and inputs are quite complicated, and then you get a little bit confused because you're like, is it an input or an output or an output? But don't worry, I get confused. There are quite a lot of good other tutorials on YouTube. Even if I get stuck on things, sometimes it's difficult, especially if people change settings because they don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they've done, and hence then it gets all very confusing because they've changed settings in an odd way, and it takes a while to work out what they've done. AES50B, we won't have anything plugged into that, so I don't need to worry about that because we'll rarely have 2 S16s plugged in. XLR out, you can actually set the outputs This is the outputs from your X32, and you can actually set them to be certain things. Now at the moment, and pretty much most of the time, I've got them set to physical input, so out 1/4, out 5/8, out 9/12, out 13/16. But you can again, you've got lots of opportunity. You can set them completely with whatever it is you want to do. Okay. If you had two X32s, okay, now again we'll go into a situation where you might want to have two X32s. You could hence do local 1/4. So then that means every single one of your 32 channels on your S16, okay, goes out of a specific thing. So that is channel 1, that is channel 2, because that can then go to another S16, sorry, to another X32, okay. But that depends if you've got a front of house mixer and a kind of a monitor mixer, and that is for bigger events. Okay, some bigger events like festivals, they'd have a whole X32 mixing desk just to do the monitors. So the front fallback monitors, you'd actually have a dedicated man on a specific mixing desk to do just monitor mixes in big festivals, and hence your big important person with the best mixing desk would be doing the mainly because there's so much more work to do on a big festival, because there's so many inputs and so many things to be in control of that it's too much for one person generally to do on their own. Okay, so it's possible that we might have, I suppose it is possible that we might at some point use two X32s, because I've got an X32 at home. I could bring it in and we could try and kind of use them together, but it would have to be a big event. It'd have to be like a big festival event where we actually need to do that. Generally, one X32 is more than enough for what we need to do with it. But if you wanted to, you can set different XLR, the actual physical outputs for the X32, out and send them to different places. Okay, but again, normally 1 through 4, 5 through 8. Okay, so I'm just gonna pop onto here and just quickly recap. If you plug something into an input, you must make sure that where you've plugged it into is where it's coming up on the mixing desk. So if you plug it into input 1, then you need to make sure in your routing that input 1 to 8 is local 1 through 8. Local means the X32 you sat at. Okay, pretty simple. Out 1 through 16, generally 15, 16 needs to be main left and right. Okay, so main left, 16 is main right. Excellent. Aux out, don't worry about. P16, don't worry about. Card out, understand what it does. Understand that it's the settings of the recording card, the 32 channel card. If you're using Cubase and you're recording multi-track stuff, then it's going to make a difference. Okay. If you're not, if you're just doing live sound, less so. Okay. AES50A, that's our digital snake, and again, generally that depends what you want, where you're plugging your microphones in. Sorry, where you're plugging your PA speakers into what outputs you want. If, for example, you had fallback monitors on the stage, you'd want output 1 through 8 to AES50 1 through 8. That means that these fallback channels here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, would go out of the S16 on stage rather than all the way up in the sound booth on the X32, which makes sense. Okay, so it's about making sure, and when you're planning a gig, you're going to need to write these things down. So you're going to hence have to plan where you're going to plug various microphones into what to do what. So it's about planning beforehand. You never want to rock up to a gig and then try and work out what you want to do, because at that point you're going to waste an awful lot of time. So it's about actually planning. The positive is that digital mixing desk, you can actually do a lot of your settings beforehand, save it, and then reload it. Okay, and you can do individual scenes. Okay, so you can actually save individual scenes. So for example, if you know for a certain song a keyboard gets used, but for the other songs it doesn't, then you can actually set it at the mixing desk. You can set it up so that at certain songs that's what it looks like, those settings. But actually the next song, if you just go like next, there the cues there, next song, it literally suddenly you've already set up that is the setting and you've saved the next song. So if there's quite a lot of difference in the settings, especially if you're using 32 channels and stuff like that, there's loads of stuff going on, you can actually set the sound. When you do like a sound check, you can get all the sounds set for different bands, and then save that band's sound, and hence when the band load up, you don't need to have written it down on a piece of paper, you've already saved it, so bang, you just load up the sound and it loads up exactly the right settings that you worked on in the sound check, which is why sound checks will become very important to make sure that you're kind of getting it done. Because what you don't want to do is the first song, often sound people in gigs sometimes, if you're not the headline band, they'll kind of sound check you during your first song. So your first song will end up sounding rubbish because they're basically getting the balance right during the first song because you haven't had a sound check. But again, if you're doing that for your event, the first song needs to have an impact for every band, and it needs to sound good. So if you're going to do that, you need to make sure you sound check and make sure the sound's good, so that when they come on, it's as good as it possibly can be. Okay, now we're on 48 minutes almost of this, which is almost a lesson, which is what I was planning to do. You should have a lot of notes. Okay, you should have quite a few notes. Okay, the idea is you're going to try some of this stuff out. I haven't got into these settings, the individual settings in the channel. I've just gone through the routing and the setup of the desk, because that's the first thing you need to organize. Okay, we haven't got into actually the things like what on earth is gain. Okay, like what is gain, what's gating and compression, all these things, but we will get there. Okay, so that's the first video, just telling you about the routing. Yeah, hopefully you've got a good amount of notes and you can put them into practice when you start having a play around. Good stuff. Talk to you soon.